So that's now a tough one after the founder of Wikipedia. But before I talk about digitalization, I just want to say I'm also a pathologic optimist. What I heard in the last two talks, and this is fascinating, we have today a little bit of discussion about business models on the internet, advertising business models, platforms, social media being a business model. It is my fundamental belief that on the long run, of course, you need some kind of business model, because a business model delivers a value add. And when there is a value add, you have the money to reinvent. So I think that to some extent, of course, it's a paradoxon. The internet started very much as a complete space of free services. Then business models came up, which today to some extent is criticized. On the other side, I think perhaps we have to combine this thinking of what is bringing digitalization to the table in terms of efficiency, and on the other side, to accept, yes, at the end of the day, there must be a business model. And this means that companies, tech companies, must generate profits, because the profits are there to innovate. Without profits, no innovations at the end of the day. In one sentence, what is Wirecard bringing or adding, so to say? And of course, we are very much today on the merchant side. And I like not to talk too much about technology acronyms. You know, we're also dealing today with artificial intelligence, with RFID, NFC, all these nice acronyms. But in one sentence, we today help the merchant to raise convergence rate. A merchant spends an enormous amount of money to bring the consumer to his checkout. And then still, up to 40, 50, 60% of consumers break up in the checkout. Of course, there are different reasons for that. It might be that you decided otherwise, like when you go into a shop and then you go out again and you're not interested anymore. But very often, it's also a dysfunctional checkout process. And in one sentence, we are today able to raise convergence rate by up to 10% and bringing down negative transactions, so-called chargebacks, by up to 50%. And this raises sales of the merchant. And it brings more efficiency. And in one sentence, that's our business model, helping the merchant to make more sales and more profits. What was the first phase of digitalization? The first phase of digitalization was mainly using digital tools to set up a real-time infrastructure, where data, might it be products, services, informations, were provided to the consumer in real time. Over a desktop, over a mobile, etc. The next big phase is definitely about algorithms, and let's call it artificial intelligence. I don't like the term artificial intelligence. At the end of the day, what we really can do today is better described in terms of machine learning. So we are not able, and I hope we never will be able, to substitute a human being in terms of its holistic, moralic decision-making process. That's not the goal. It's at the end of the day about new ways of dynamic statistics, mathematics, that really optimize to some extent, the way data is understood. So I think in the next 10 years, it's not about owning data, but it's about the algorithms that deliver a value out of data. And so many companies own so many data, and everybody is talking today about collecting data. But in reality, 99.9% of data is not used in an efficient way. And also, let's say, I think there will be a transformation. Today, we have this big discussion that personalized data is very much used. And sometimes, of course, there's a conflict with privacy, and that's true. I think it's not about giving out personalized data or delivering personalized data to third parties. It's about probabilities. So when we today perform risk management, we do not give out to the merchant any personalized data. We generate in real time the probability that the payment solution you use is really yours. So we protect you as the consumer. And secondly, when the payment solution doesn't allow a real-time authorization, we generate a score value that defines in real time the probability that you really have enough funding to cover the costs of the payment transaction. This is about probabilities. It's not about giving out personalized data. And I think that's generally the paradigm for the next 10 years. I think connected with this algorithmical approach, we will also see a breakup of silos. What do I mean by that? Today, we are all in competition very much orienting towards other peer groups of our industries. So a high fashion company like Chanel is probably looking what Dior is doing or what Valentino is doing. Lidl is looking what Walmart is doing and what Amazon is doing and what Aldi is doing. An airline is very much positioning itself against other airlines. And on the other side, there's huge spending in this competition to get the new consumer. And this marketing spending, which is very much, let's say, has been driving also the success of social media platforms, because a lot of advertising, of course, moved from traditional advertising platforms such as TV or newspapers to social, is still static. It's still a push marketing. It's much more granular than it has been 10, 15 years ago. So today, of course, over social media, a consumer is profiled much more in detail than it was 15 years ago in a TV advertising where you just knew how many people between 5 and 50 years old, to be a little bit cynical, were sitting before a TV set. But there's still no real-time trigger. Or if there's a real-time trigger, it's a post-view real-time trigger. What can we do to bring down these huge advertising costs? We can generate probabilities in what kind of product you're interested in the next 2 hours, 2 days, 1 week. What do I mean by that? It's interesting to find out what is a merchant, what is a consumer doing before he's using the service or before he's buying the product of a merchant, and what is he doing after that? So for example, when you would take now an Uber ride or a ride-sharing service, to say it without brand, to the inner city of Munich, let's say to Maximilian Street, this triggers probabilities, that you could be interested to go there into a restaurant, that you could be interested to go buying in some store there. Let's say some luxury store, also some general fashion store, or that you want to buy some jewelry. And of course, this probability is an extremely interesting information. If it is provided in real time to the merchant that is in Maximilian Street, he theoretically could do in real time an offering to you that probably meets much more your need than when he does a general advertising over social media. And for that, I think that for all merchant categories, in the next 10 years, it's not only about finding out what competition is doing, but also finding out what is a consumer classically doing in real time before he takes the service and after that. A big leverage point for that is, of course, mobility. Because normally, the initial step to go, for example, purchasing something is some kind of mobility service. Might it be you fly to another city, you book a flight from Munich to Paris. This triggers a lot of probabilities in hospitality there, in fashion stores, in museums, in galleries, etc. Might it be a microcosmic mobility that you take in a city, a certain movement, that you take the underground, or that you take a ride-sharing service? And of course, we can generate these probabilities. We have this cross-vertical view. We see food retail, we see fashion, we see consumer goods. We have nearly 100 airlines on the platform. And we can help the merchant to generate these probabilities. And this could, in my opinion, trigger a big transformation. If I would get in real time a service offering at a good price of a product or service I'm really interested in the next 2 hours or in the next week, it's not marketing anymore. It's a big transformation from a push approach to a pull approach. And I think Uber prominently spent it last year $3 billion in getting new customers. I had 4 or 8 weeks ago a discussion with a telecom CEO. They sometimes already spent 2 or 3 times annual revenue that they do with a consumer in getting a new customer. I think this kind of thinking could bring down customer acquisition costs dramatically by 70, 80%. And it could break up the silos. So for merchants and service providers, consumer-facing, it could in the future be much more relevant what is happening in real time before and after than only just looking at what is the competition doing. And for that, the merchant has 2 or 3 challenges. On the other side, big chances to benefit from this transformation. On the one side, of course, he has to completely link all his sales channels in a unified commerce approach. So one CRM system, one data warehousing system that is completely linked with his real-time digitalized offering. He has to anticipate 2 new sales channels that we see. We think that voice commerce will come up in the next 10 years. And we had a discussion today. Social media I think, will become a sales channel. So in the future, probably over social media, it will not only be gathering information, looking at nice pictures, but there will also be a direct integration of the checkout. So the merchant will have to focus on 4 to 5 sales channels: online, mobile, the point of sale that is here to stay, voice commerce, and social media. And coming a little bit to social media, I think it's not only about seeing social media as a selling point or the way to present yourself, but I think it's really about building your community. And also there, we have today communities that are very often not interlinked. It's about a cross-community view. So when in real time, it's very important to see what is happening before and after. Also, the communities must interlink. So perhaps this is also a way that the silos, also let's say the echo rooms that are there in social media, could be broken up. So I think we will see 3 dimensions of convergence. All sales channels will converge over this seamless approach. We will see a convergence between complementary verticals. So mobility services, fashion, hospitality, etc. And the link to this all will be algorithms that generate value out of data. And not, again, there will be a transformation. In most of these processes, no personalized data will be used, but it's about probabilities. It's really about anticipating the next need of a consumer. There's a second big theme or a big label over the next 10 years. And this is, of course, sustainability. I do not want to start an ideological discussion, but it's my clear conviction that we must see sustainability costs, especially now environmental costs, CO2 emissions, etc., as costs. It's not something, in my opinion, that we can believe in or not believe in. It's costs. And in some way or the other, we must get these costs into the product price. Because I see these costs similar like production costs, marketing costs, it's real costs. We see it now in Australia. If the Australian business model would have, let's say, fully included the sustainability costs of coal, probably would have developed in a different direction. There are now 2 possibilities to get these costs into the product. Taxes. But taxes is something very ideological. At the end of the day, some states will do it and other states perhaps will not do it. I think we need something that is more technocratic. And when we accept sustainability costs as costs, we could find a way that all products that are registered for a certain market also have to include these costs in the product price. And this part of the costs should be taken to compensate, for example, for the negative effect of CO2 emissions. So that on the other side, also companies come up that concentrate on innovations in this area. So I think we have to solve it over innovations. It's not so much about guilt. We are today always discussing guilt. governments are guilty not to address it. Older generations are guilty not to address it. I think it shouldn't be a discussion about guilt. Because at the end of the day, we all want to be mobile. We want to have our food be in a refrigerator. We want to have homes that are warm. It's about putting it into the product price, and by that, generating the right innovations. I think the big problem was that in the last 20, 30 years, of course, environmental costs were socialized because they were not in the product price, and R&D departments didn't take them into account. And if we find a global way that they come into the product price, I think we have a good chance to address this problem over innovations. And I think that digitalization, that at the end of the day, of course, has very much to do with efficiency gains. So theoretically, when in real time a product that is ordered is only then produced and sourced, this is a much more efficient process than what we still find today in many product areas. That still a lot of products, not only in food retail, but also in all other areas, are still produced to be, at the end of the day, destroyed because nobody buys them. And the other big direction, of course, is exactly what I meant in the beginning, that by, let's say, bringing down this large bunch of costs in advertising, on the other side, this could also be a way for companies to more invest in the sustainability area. And now I think I have talked enough. Thank you very much for listening. And